is a CBC News special report.
Good morning from London. I'm Peter Mansbridge, just outside Buckingham Palace in the British capital. Well, the final chapter in the all too tragically short life of Diana, Princess of Wales, is about to be written, and London is ready. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets yesterday, and this morning they have been joined by hundreds of thousands more. In just a few moments, the funeral procession will begin. It's along a route about 6 kilometers long from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey. London police expecting millions in the streets for this procession. One has no idea what is the perfect weather for a funeral, any funeral. Well, if you think perfect weather for a funeral is sunny, clear, and warm, well, that is the weather in London today. Over the next few hours, helping me tell this incredible story, a remarkable one here in the British capital, is the CBC's Alison Smith. Alison.
Peter, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets along the route that the funeral procession will take this morning, but at the same time, it's as if a hush has descended over the city. There is a sense of anticipation, clearly a sense of grief and sorrow, but also a feeling that these people wanted to come together, that in some way they wanted to share their grief about the Princess of Wales. It's an eerie quiet in the early morning, but as I say, so many people in the streets.
And it's been that kind of quiet throughout this week, right from the beginning when we got here the day after the Princess of Wales' body was flown home from France. We began to see it building in the streets, the processions of flowers that were located at different areas, St. James's Palace, here at Buckingham Palace, and at Kensington Palace, as the people laid flowers at the gates, brought in candles in the evening, an eerie quiet throughout this week. But as Alison says, the crowds have been building since day one, and today they reached their highest point. Well, throughout our broadcast today, we are going to benefit from the wise guidance and comments of Douglas Kay, the royal biographer who has been working with us these past few days, trying to come to grips with what's happened here in London and really around the world. And Douglas, I think that's one of the key points here today still. Everyone expected there would be a lot of grief and public sorrow at the death of Diana, but it has been universal and so widespread, and many commentators even still today trying to understand why the depth of this is so great.
Yes, I think that's the one question that will remain afterwards, why. I think thousands of words will be written to try to explain this magic of Diana that has brought so many thousands out and created interest in every corner of the world. There's been nothing like it, it's been said again and again, but why, we still don't know, we can't fathom.
Well, in a few moments' time, as we said, from Kensington Palace, where Diana, Princess of Wales, has been living, the funeral procession will begin. The body was taken there last night from St. James's Palace by Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry, and in a few moments' time, that procession will begin from Kensington Palace. But here at Buckingham Palace, as you can tell, which has always been the focal point for so many of the great state occasions here, whether it was the wedding of Diana and Charles in 1981, July of 81 here, Sarah Ferguson and the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, and just a few years ago, the 50th anniversary celebrations of the end of the Second World War, the 50th anniversary of VE Day. Again today, the crowds have come here in the many thousands, but this is just one small part of what is an extremely long route. This now to Kensington Palace, as we take along the route heading up towards Kensington Palace, where the procession will begin. And you can tell, once again here this morning, the streets lined as they were last night for the rather, slow but in some ways fast trip by the hearse taking the body of Diana to Kensington Palace. Today, obviously, the procession on gun carriage will be much slower.
So much of this, Peter, has in fact been driven by this very public and tremendous outpouring of public grief. Last night, that move of the coffin from St. James's to Kensington was meant really to be an administrative process. It was not meant to be part of the ceremony of this occasion. But there were people lining the streets, people who came to see it. perhaps some of them not being able to be here today, but it did become a part of the occasion. And this too, this is Westminster Abbey, where all of this will end up today, where the funeral service itself will be held. But the procession that will take the coffin there, as we've mentioned, has been expanded precisely because there are so many people who wanted to come and feel what it was like to be part of this tremendous outpouring of grief.
Westminster Abbey, the site of so many past funerals of monarchs in this country, many buried right at the Abbey. The last major royal funeral, of course, was George VI, the Queen's father, in 1952. The service taking place there in the Abbey, back here now at Buckingham Palace, where yesterday the Queen addressed the nation from her private apartments in the palace, but also took that remarkable walkabout in the crowd here, helping move some of the flowers over to lay at the gates of the palace and talking with people after what has been obviously an extremely difficult week for the country and at times a very difficult one for the royal family, as questions have been raised about whether they were sharing the same kind of public grief and sorrow as so many of the citizens of this country and places around the world were sharing, and at least showing that they recognized what was happening around the country.
It was very clear in her brief remarks yesterday the depth of emotion that she felt, as we've noted in the hours since that speech, a real sense of her feelings, not only as their monarch, as their queen, but as she said, speaking as a grandmother too. She talked about the range of emotion that anyone might feel after the death of someone very close to them, the shock, the sense of disbelief, the anger, all of that range of emotion that I'm sure the public felt, but the Queen also recognized among in their family. I also think too, in talking to people since those remarks, there is a change in the way people have felt about this. They were waiting for that kind of recognition, not only of how the royal family felt, but also recognition of how they felt. And since then, I think now they've been prepared to give the royal family the space they might need, the privacy they might need to mourn in a more private way.
Well, we are less than a minute away from the first sight of the coffin of Diana, Princess of Wales, as it will begin its departure from Kensington Palace along the long route to through past Buckingham Palace here, where we're located, and on its way to Westminster Abbey. The procession expected to take almost 2 hours. A rather slow, not march, they're calling it a walk through the streets of London. There'll be no military bands, but there will be, as we said, the coffin atop a gun carriage with a military escort, and we're just seeing the first glimpses of that now. Kensington Palace, as we say, the home that Diana has been in for the past few years. And just last night, after her body lay at St. James's Palace, just close by here at Buckingham Palace, the body was taken back to Kensington. It was part of the change of plans in the middle of the week to lengthen the route when it was became so abundantly clear that so many people wanted their opportunity to stand by in this procession.
There's also been the suggestion in the media reports about that change of route that this was something that the young princes wanted, that William and Harry felt that it would somehow be appropriate that this procession began from their mother's home and from what is their home when they've been in London, obviously staying with their mother.
I think, Peter, it's worth remembering, and probably we're relieved to hear that Princess was not alone last night. the Bishop of London, I believe, and the chaplain of the Royal Chapel was there with them, with her, saying prayers throughout the night.
This part of the procession from here right down to the area of Buckingham Palace will be just the cortege, just the escort, the body on the gun carriage. Once they reach the area of St. James's Palace, along the Mall near Buckingham Palace, the procession will be joined by more than 500 members of different charities that Diana favored and worked with, and quite possibly by some members of the royal family. It's still not known at this hour whether the Princes, William and Harry, will be following the casket on its way to Westminster Abbey in the final portion of the procession route. There is a great deal of anticipation here around the palace area that the Queen may make an appearance outside the palace as the procession passes the palace on its way to the Abbey and before she leaves to attend the service at Westminster.
You know, Peter, watching this very dignified and sad procession out of Kensington Palace now, one can't help but think of the vibrant young woman that used to sneak out of Kensington Palace in an effort to go out on her own to try and escape some of the strictures of royal life. Was often seen leaving here in her own car, as a chance to get out and get around the city of London to meet friends.
Skip across the road, just across the road to the shops, her favourite shops. And always pursued by the photographers. This time they are mute.
Only the sound of the horses' hooves on the pavement outside Kensington Palace as Diana, Princess of Wales, leaves that palace for the last time.
It's almost as if the horses know, isn't it? The way they're walking.
Of Westminster Abbey are tolling once a minute throughout the course of this procession. You will hear them echoing as the procession makes its way through the streets.
gun carriage, full look with the casket of Diana, Princess of Wales, on board. And the first sounds from the crowd as we've seen people throwing flowers onto the street. Some people yelling, "Diana, I love you." Just a few basic facts about the gun carriage. The 13-pound gun carriage has been used for state and military funerals since the turn of the century. Queen Victoria in 1901 was the first to be given a parade-type funeral using the gun carriage. And since it's been used in the funerals of Edward VII, George V, George VI, Duke of Windsor, and Lord Mountbatten of Burma in 1979.
And like you, Peter, I remember the funeral of Sir Winston Churchill particularly, and Lord Mountbatten much more recently, when there were decorations and plumed hats on the coffin. Here we have simple flowers, the lilies, the arum lilies, the favourite of Princess Diana. Nothing military, nothing pomp and ceremony, just peaceful beauty.
Just to locate the procession for you now, after leaving Kensington Palace, it will head straight along Kensington Road on the south side of Kensington Gardens and Hyde Park towards Hyde Park Corner. The gun carriage being attended at the sides by Welsh Guards who will be then carrying the coffin into Westminster Abbey about an hour and a half from now when the procession ends. And that shot gives you an indication of the true mixture of the crowds here. Remember at the wedding of Diana and Charles, the same kind of thing, where you suddenly saw a total mix of the young, the old, those who followed all sorts of different lifestyles, and you see them gathered together shoulder to shoulder once again today for the funeral procession, sharing their grief and sorrow.
muffled bell people, such as
similar fashion to the way the funeral of the Queen's father, George VI, in 1952. It struck out once for each year of his life, 56 times. That is the royal standard draped over the coffin, as it was when the casket was picked up in Paris and flown back to London this last summer.
And the flowers on top from Diana's family and from members of the royal family. White lilies, that would be her favorite flowers.
long shadows people. Perfect morning. It was almost as if Diana had chosen the weather, as bright as herself.
Last night, a light rain falling over the Capitol here as the coffin was taken to Kensington. And that seemed to add, too, to the vision of her body being taken back from St. James's to Kensington in dusk.
Going very near now to the Duke of Wellington's house at Hyde Park Corner. Not far, actually, from Bruton Street, where the Queen was born. think what surprises me most, Peter, is the silence. Other funerals, state funerals particularly, there's been the bands playing solemn, mournful music. Here you've got none of that. You've just got the sound of people's cries from the side of the pavement. Diana, Diana, we love you.
It's that silence that still underlines the state of shock so many people are in. And for the thousands who are on the streets today, it's really their first tangible evidence that she's gone. They're seeing the coffin in person for the first time.
Exactly. It's come home to them, I'm sure, especially the people who've been out there in the streets for hours and hours, have probably queued for 12 hours to sign the books of condolence. They've then slept in the streets, and now the moment has come when they actually see the cortege go past. And that must bring them to silence and tears.
Coffin and the procession now just passing Royal Albert Hall, just at the south end of Kensington Gardens, just about to reach the south end of Hyde Park. Royal Albert Hall, of course, the scene of so many concerts that Diana attended. This is where the procession is heading towards Westminster Abbey, where, like everywhere else in the city, quiet as some of the invited guests begin their arrivals. For the most part, people who worked in charities with Diana. There are some people you'll recognize. Hillary Clinton, of course, the wife of the President of the United States. Lloyd Axworthy, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister. And others, but for the most part, people you won't recognize, but who meant so much to Princess of Wales. In terms of the charity work, she was very heavily involved in more than 100 charities. Back to the procession now, as it begins its departure from the Kensington area and it heads on to Kensington Road, south of Hyde Park.
You mentioned there, Peter, the charities, and there have been rumours that the Princess intended to withdraw from public life in November. How could she possibly, when you see this? She would never have been allowed to leave the people.
Look inside Westminster Abbey as the guests, the invited guests, about 2,000, begin their way to take their places inside the Abbey for the funeral service, which will begin in about an hour and 20 minutes from now.
Many of these guests, in fact, have been asked to be there before 9 o'clock this morning, some 2 hours ahead of the service itself.
Procession continues to wind its way on Kensington Road, south of Hyde Park. Obviously, this is now back at...
That's Lady Rain Spencer. I think that's the wife of the previous Earl. The stepmother of the princess.
Looking at some of the flowers around Westminster, just in the last couple of days, people started bringing the flowers to the Abbey where the service will take place. The flower story is a remarkable one here in London and around the world, as it's clear now that flowers, bouquets are being dropped off everywhere at areas that symbolized Britain or the monarchy.
Prime Ministers,
so many
ex-Prime Ministers,
as well.
Archbishop.
There's Lady Thatcher just arriving.
Yes, a number of former British Prime Ministers will be in attendance today, as of course will the present Prime Minister, Tony Blair. But remarkably few politicians, really, aside from the past Prime Ministers and the current Prime Minister of Britain. Only one other member of the British cabinet will be here. As we've said, the service that will take place here inside the Abbey, marked mainly by people who have worked in charities with Diana, Princess of Wales, over these past years. And especially in the years since the separation and divorce from Prince Charles, where she's been extremely active both on a public way and a very private way. And I think, Alison, that's one of the stories we've heard unfold this week.
So many, we know about the public events she attended. You mentioned Albert Hall, where the cortege just passed by. We know about the public events, but what has become clear is that she often slipped away on her own to go and visit children in hospital, for example, would write them notes at important events in their life. It seemed she spent more time thinking about others, certainly, than she did thinking about herself. If the volume of notes and the gift of flowers that she sent, the time that she spent visiting people in hospital, are any indication of that.
And perhaps that's just one of the tragedies about the majority of the publicity that she did receive. Of course, had nothing to do with that, but had so much to do with what was her personal and private life.
And of course, the same can be said, too, for other members of the royal family as well. What we see in public in terms of their charitable work is often not the full extent of what they do. Like any other individual, they do have private interests and private causes that they pursue as well.
So things beginning to take shape inside the Abbey, and we are tied to the pictures that are being provided to us by the British broadcasters. And so when we do cut back and forth like that, that's the reason. Some of the other dignitaries heading in their vehicles, I think this might have been this Lord Spencer, Diana's brother, having just departed for Earl Spencer. Just departed for the Abbey. As we've said, there are rumors here at the location we're at Buckingham Palace, that the Queen and other members of the royal family, not Prince Charles or the two sons, Princes William and Harry, but the rest of the royal family may make an appearance on the streets here as the funeral procession passes by. Earl Spencer, who made that quite dramatic speech last Sunday, shortly after the news of the death of his sister Diana was broadcast, his speech, which shared the grief but also pointedly chastised the media and especially the tabloid press over their following of his sister.
And of course, it's been reported in the papers here in the last day or so that some of the tabloid newspaper editors who had been invited to this service at Westminster Abbey, the Earl then phoned them and asked them not to come, given the controversy over the role that the tabloid has pressed and the media played in Diana's life.
It was remarkable that it even got to that. People are still shaking their heads that editors of tabloid newspapers would have been invited, apparently, by the palace. I guess they went off some guest list that must have been left around somewhere. But Earl Spencer phoned these people personally and asked them not to come, and of course they have heeded his request. There will be media representatives inside the Abbey, and editors of all the broadsheets, the more traditional British newspapers, will be in the Abbey.
We should also point out that this service is going to be broadcast on loudspeakers outside the Abbey, so that of course more people will be able to hear, and they've erected 3 large video screens in Hyde Park, again so that the hundreds of thousands of people who are in the area, who have been following the funeral procession through the streets of London, will be able to see the service as well.
There's the leader of the opposition, bald-headed man in the centre with his fiancée. I think very difficult to see from here, but not so many people. She had such a wide spread of friends too, that they came from all walks of life. It isn't just the establishment that is here, it is hairdressers, pop stars, people who she knew, and people also who weren't famous at all, whose lives she touched.
Back to the procession route now as it continues its slow walk towards the first area where it won't be stopping, but will be passing where there will be some activity. is the Buckingham Palace area, and as we said, we are expecting some members of the royal family will come out and stand by the street with the people as it goes by, before they then head over to the Abbey for the service. Then from Buckingham Palace it will go to St. James's Palace, where members of different charities will join the procession. They will be the first people other than the immediate guard of honor surrounding the casket to join the procession, and we are still unaware at this hour whether or not immediate members of Diana's family, especially her two sons, Princes William and Harry, will walk the final 20 to 25 minutes with their mother's casket to the Abbey. Richard Branson, the head of the huge Virgin Empire Airlines records, close friend of Diana's, worked with her on many different charitable operations, just arriving at the Abbey. We should note, as we see the preparations for the service here at Westminster, the Archbishop of Canterbury there in the middle of your
former
Archbishop of Canterbury.
The man who married Princess Diana.
St. Paul's Cathedral in 1981. The current Archbishop will be conducting part of the service today here in the Abbey. I was going to mention that as we await to go back to the pictures of the funeral procession, and we'll respect the fact that for so many people it is a private moment to collect their own thoughts while we're watching that procession, and we'll respect that.
That's the leader of the opposition and the Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, on the right.
Robin Cook, familiar to some Canadians, of course. He was in Ottawa shortly after the Labour government took power here, and gave its support to Canada on the landmines issue, which have also, of course, was such a concern to Diana, the Princess of Wales. I was going to briefly mention, and I'll try that now, that while this major service that the eyes of the world will be focused on over these next couple of hours takes place here in London, there are services taking place all over the world and many across Canada from coast to coast. And depending on where you are, many of those special services are being held today. Halifax,
Lord
Kingston,
going in now. Sorry,
Kitchener, Niagara Falls, Ottawa, Owen Sound, little towns like Stratford, Toronto, Windsor, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Edmonton, Victoria, and Vancouver. Some cities already having conducted their services in honor of Diana. Last night in Winnipeg, in Regina and Brandon on Thursday.
Here now we're seeing the procession, I think, readying itself now, waiting for the arrival of the funeral procession. It must have been a difficult choice. 5 people from each of the charities, more than 500 altogether, but to choose among the hundreds and thousands of people who would have been involved in those charities and who benefited from Diana's interest, to choose who would be part of this procession and also who would represent them then in the service at the church. The procession will actually not go into the Abbey itself. It's going to go into a chapel next door where they'll be able to listen to the service as well.
That's looking back, of course, at Buckingham Palace, the Victoria Memorial, the center of your shot there, and that's looking up the Mall towards the palace. But still about a half an hour away, perhaps a little less from the palace, the funeral procession. The coffin of Diana aboard the gun carriage, attended to on either side by Welsh Guards who will be carrying the coffin into Westminster Abbey after its arrival there. And as we said, as we watch the crowd as well, some moments need no commentary. That back at the Abbey now, that's Mohammed El Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, who died in the car accident in Paris last week with Diana. And as the week has progressed, it has become abundantly clear here that that relationship between Dodi El Fayed and Diana was a very real and a very special one. Word as the week ended that, in fact, he had given her a ring moments before they got into that car for the drive from the Ritz Hotel, intended to go to his apartment in Paris.
That, I think I'm right in saying, is the princess's mother. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, it's very difficult with the sunlight.
It's the Speaker of the...
Makes this picture
it's the
difficult.
Speaker of the House.
That's right, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Betty Booth's right.
Luciano Pavarotti. There had been some discussion this week that he may sing at the funeral service, but he said he has been too overcome with grief. However, he is here at the service. You know, moments ago when the coffin passed the Royal Albert Hall, that was one of the concerts, of course, that Diana attended. Pavarotti was there in 1995. An hour now from the expected arrival here. That's Paddy Ashdown, one of the political leaders here in Britain. An hour now from the arrival expected at Westminster Abbey of the funeral procession. Guests, of course, asked to be here and in their place considerably well before that.
Followed, Peter, by David Steele, now Lord Steele, former head of the Liberal Party, leader of the Liberal Party. Might be of interest, we passed it, we'll see come back to it.
We will. Back here at the palace, Prince Philip, about to leave the palace. Alone in his limousine. Interesting that the Queen is not traveling with the Prince at this point, which would further indicate perhaps the Queen will be here at the palace, at least for the moments when procession passes by. It's also possible, depending on where the vehicle is going, that the Duke may be, Duke of Edinburgh may be heading down to St. James's Palace as well, where the different people will be joining the procession. Elton John arriving.
Who, of course, is not only a friend of Diana's. We saw her recently comforting him at the funeral of Gianni Versace. And George Michael as well. And as you mentioned, Peter, Elton John's piano has been brought into the Abbey for his contribution to this service, where he's going to sing a Candle in the Wind, but of course with the lyrics specially rewritten for Diana. He was also very active in the charities that she was involved with, particularly in the AIDS charities.
At St. James's Palace, where Diana's body lay this week before heading back to Kensington Palace last night, and these are the different members of the different charities who will be joining the procession once it arrives by the St. James's Palace area. The corner of Hyde Park, the Duke of Wellington Arch, the procession now about to pass through that area. Now, perhaps 20 minutes at the most away from the Buckingham Palace area. And that's where we're located and where it's expected members of the royal family will come and stand by the sidewalk as the procession goes by. And this area of the end of Hyde Park before it heads towards south of Green Park into the Buckingham Palace area. The memorial to the Duke of Wellington, the great British military hero, the Battle of Waterloo. His own state funeral through the streets of London in 1852.
You know, there is in all of this a real sense of history, not only in the tradition that we see followed with the gun carriage and perhaps part of the route that this has taken, but also in the crowds that have come out to to grieve for Diana. There is also a sense of history in terms of what this might mean for the monarchy, for the royal family itself. She had a tremendous impact around the world, and while history is not written yet, there is a sense of that this is a very momentous time.
From this point, the procession will head down Constitution Hill towards Buckingham Palace proper. The gardens of Buckingham Palace will be on one side of this route as the procession heads towards it. And it's worth noting that this is also the point in the procession where on the return the princess will head north from this particular corner and head through North London towards the M1 motorway and heading up to her final resting place. But the route from Kensington Palace to this point, the crowds you saw lined there, that will have been their only opportunity to have seen the procession. The area that the procession moves on now will be retraced following the service at Westminster Abbey. And then, as we said, heading north. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and his wife arriving at Westminster Abbey. He has been a very key figure this week, right from the first news of Diana's tragic death. His remarks to the nation, first in a statement, then in front of the cameras, reflected the nature of the grief and sorrow that was immediate here. And as he talked of the people's princess, that whole thought then became the key thought for the week. It's also reported and speculated that Prime Minister Blair had a great deal to do with the turnabout in the royal family's reactions this week. The reports that he was on the phone with Prince Charles a number of times in the early part of the week and then in the middle of the week, telling Prince Charles that the royal family had to deal with the feeling of unease on the part of many people in this country that they were ignoring the public grief that was taking place.
And of course the Prime Minister as well taking part in the service today. Prince Charles apparently feeling that because he was divorced it would be inappropriate for him to speak, and also if another member of the royal family spoke it would only highlight the fact that in fact the prince was not going to take part. So Tony Blair is going to speak along with Diana's two sisters and her brother.
Dr. Henry Kissinger described himself this week as a close friend of Diana. There had been a number of events that both Dr. Kissinger and his wife Nancy there beside him attended in the United States.
Lord Attenborough, David Attenborough, film producer who coached Princess Diana in her early speeches.
One of the newspaper editors here in Britain was invited to the wedding. The British cameras are training, for obvious reasons on the known people. Here's the Queen at Buckingham Palace as we quickly revert back here. And this is just behind our booth area. And so the rumors have been true. The Queen and members of the royal family walking from the palace, heading towards the area where the funeral procession will come by. There you see Prince Edward, Prince Andrew beside her. I think that's the Queen's lady in waiting. And a spontaneous round of applause now at the palace on the part of the many thousands here as the Queen has made an appearance at the gates. In fact, just behind where we're located here, as they wait for the arrival of the funeral procession.
Princess Margaret as well.
Princess Margaret, who was so critical of Princess Diana, but all that is forgotten now.
One has to assume that these two sisters, the Queen and Princess Margaret, on occasions like this, and I'm sure especially so this week, reflect back to that time in 1952, 45 years ago, when their father passed away and the Queen eventually was coronated as Queen Elizabeth II, for the difficulties of that particular week that they had. Diana's cortege, funeral cortege, perhaps 5 or 10 minutes away from Buckingham Palace. As the royal family waits in attendance, we should note Prince Charles, Princes William and Harry not seen there. There is great speculation that they may well join the procession shortly after it passes St. James's Palace.
I think you'll see in a moment that the Duchess of York is there outside the palace gates waiting, and also her two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie.
The Duchess of York, of course, Sarah Ferguson. It's reported that she spent the night at the palace here, the whole royal family, there in the different apartments there.
There's been a great healing of wounds over this tragic event, Peter. Deep wounds.
It's true, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, going to St. James's Palace where Diana's body lay a couple of nights ago. The two had had a falling out, hadn't talked in months, and they never had resolved their differences. And it's said to have been an extremely emotional moment when the Duchess of York was there at St. James's Palace and asked to be left alone for 10 or 15 minutes to say her final farewell to Diana. It's also reported that Diana and her own mother, who will be here in attendance at the funeral, had not talked in some time and had a fairly serious falling out as well. So as you say, Douglas, a healing of wounds perhaps a little too late in some cases.
Duchess of Kent, we saw a moment ago, and there's the Duchess of York now.
Right, Sarah Ferguson just put her back to us there, as you say.
Mrs. Chirac, the wife of the French president, arriving at Westminster Abbey now.
French president reportedly desperate to show Francis feelings about this terrible week, and of course, obviously, because the accident took the life of Diana and her companion Dodi El-Fayed happening in Paris.
And he was there at the hospital where Diana died when Prince Charles and Diana's two sisters arrived to bring the body home.
That's Princess Beatrix, Sarah Ferguson, and the Duke of York's elder daughter. Princess Margaret, next door to the Queen there, who's known so much tragedy in her own life.
It's very rare to see members of the royal family in this area outside the palace. Yesterday, the Queen's visit there to talk to members of the general public and to help lay the flowers was the first time she'd been there since the end of the war. And in fact, it was the two sisters, Margaret and Elizabeth, both as princesses, who were out there helping celebrate on the streets. So obviously a very different time. Today they await this procession, the funeral procession for Diana, Princess of Wales.
I glimpsed Prince Andrew outside the palace just now, and of course you'll remember that he was on an exchange from Gordonston to Lakefield College in Ontario in 1977, so he's well known in Canada.
You know, in one of the last interviews that Diana gave before she passed away, she talked about a number of members of the family, including Andrew, and said that he really didn't get the credit he was due, that he worked tirelessly on the part of the royal family and in a number of charities and different organizations as she did. And she was quite upset by the fact that he was basically totally ignored.
Well, it's also been clear in the ways that she talked about raising her own sons, that while she knew that she was raising a future king, that she wanted to raise young Harry to be a support in some sense to his brother. And that clearly too has been the role that Prince Andrew has played. And we saw it earlier this week also, Andrew and Edward, the first of the royal family to come to St. James's Palace to pay their respects to Diana.
Of course, you have to remember that Prince Andrew had his own career in the Navy, which kept him away from public events more than perhaps he would like. But when he was on leave, I know he did do a lot of good charitable work.
Procession now arriving close by Buckingham Palace. And these pictures will certainly speak for themselves.
If you couldn't read that card on the wreath on the top of the coffin, it was clearly a gift from the children. The card read, "Mummy." All along this procession, flowers have become such a big part of all of this, a way to express grief. People have been throwing flowers into the street as the coffin passes by.
Well, a quite remarkable moment as the procession passed in front of Buckingham Palace, and the members of the royal family walking out of the palace and standing by as it went by. Making the turn in front of the palace, in front of the Victoria Memorial, heading down towards St. James's Palace now, where for the first time the procession will be joined by a number of people. As we know with certainty, it will be joined by members of different charities, more than 500 of them. But it is also expected, and perhaps after what we've just witnessed, it gives further belief to the thought that Princes William and Harry, who, as Alison mentioned, must have placed that envelope on the coffin, will join the procession as it heads to Westminster. Prince Charles has not been seen yet today. It's possible that he will be with them, as will Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. Perhaps the Duke of Edinburgh. We saw him leaving the palace about 20 minutes ago. Well, yes, here they are. As they head out from the St. James's Palace area. Prince Charles, Prince Harry beside him, 12-year-old. Immediately behind him, Prince William. Earl Spencer, the princess's brother. And the Duke of Edinburgh in the back. Prince Charles explaining to Prince Harry what's about to take place. And I think we'll all want to share these moments in our own private way. mother, Shan Kidd, who came down from an island in Scotland where she lives for the funeral service.
Also with her, her other two daughters as well, Sarah McCorkadell and Jane Fellows, both of whom will speak at the service.
Diana's mother attended a service last night in Westminster Cathedral because she's converted to Catholicism. Very devout woman.
We saw just a moment ago as the procession passed by synagogue here in London. The chief rabbi from London was standing as the procession went by. Quite a remarkable scene in the procession. Just amazing. Here inside the Abbey as the immediate families now begin to arrive because the funeral procession itself is now only perhaps 20 minutes away from the Abbey. The service to begin at 11 o'clock here in London.
And of course, all of the music that's being played ahead of time as well has been chosen by the Spencer family and the royal family, music that Diana loved.
One person we haven't seen so far, of course, is the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She presumably will be the last to arrive, 97 years old.
She was at Balmoral all this week with the royal family, and she flew down yesterday as well. And it, as Douglas Kay suggests, is expected she will be arriving with the Queen and Princess Margaret and the other members of the royal family who will be arriving at the Abbey by then. But back now to this incredible scene. As the princes, young and old, and Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, in the middle, follow the funeral procession towards the Abbey, and they too followed by the different members of different charities, the princess had supported. Well, there you go, the Queen Mother. Now traveling from Buckingham Palace, or perhaps Clarence House, where her official residence, not far from Buckingham Palace.
I know the car is making its way.
Yes, to the palace, actually. She must have just come from Buckingham Palace, and she's from Clarence House, her residence, towards Buckingham Palace. Queen Mother, well, you know, where do you start and where do you stop using words to describe her and the incredible life she has led? 97 years of age today, attending the funeral of Diana as the procession continues.
And many have talked about some of the similar qualities that the Queen Mother shared with Diana. Their affinity for the people, their willingness to talk to them and to reach out and touch them in a way that some of the more reserved members of the royal family have not been able to do.
She stayed with the Queen Mother, Diana, those nights before that wedding in 1981. She stayed at Clarence House, and they were close, very close.
Extraordinary to think that 74 years ago the Queen Mother was married in Westminster Abbey. 74 years, hardly imaginable. And she's seen the history of the century pass by, and she's played a big part in its history.
The procession will be arriving now here at Horse Guard Square, where if you've been to London, there are so many days where the ceremonies take place right on that yard there. You've just seen in the foreground disappearing now as we look up at the procession. Military tattoos and different formations that take place there that tourists come to see. Today, of course, a much different sight. The procession will go right through Horse Guards yard and through the archway underneath the Horse Guards building before making the final series of turns towards Westminster Abbey.
I have memories, Peter, of Princess Diana in Horse Guards parade when the trooping the colour ceremony in which she took part. And she was always the star there, and she always had the most beautiful clothes. And the Queen, of course, was the centre of the ceremony, but all eyes were on Diana. And interesting how Prince Harry, perhaps not doing it now, but he was earlier, a good step in front of the others, as if he couldn't get near enough to his mother. But he's now fallen back in line with the others. The other princes.
4-5 saniye gördüm.
The Queen now leaving Buckingham Palace. Queen Mother had arrived there a few moments ago, and it's believed they were both in the car, perhaps with, well, let's see, the beginning of the different processions of vehicles taking members of the royal family. Now, this is a historic moment. The royal standard has been dropped as the Queen leaves the palace. This will be the Union Jack unfolding on top of Buckingham Palace. Never before has this been done. And it will be immediately lowered to half-mast. This, too, never happened again.
You can hear that applause, Peter. This is something, when we've talked to people in the crowds this week, that they have wanted to see. The most public gesture of respect for Diana. In those days when the palace was empty of the royal family, when they were in seclusion at Balmoral, there were so many people here who wanted to see some sign from this building that would show that respect and gesture of grief.
I think too, Peter, it is a response to the Queen's message, the tribute the other evening. People are saying to her as she passes by, good on you, so to speak, for doing that. It has helped us. And it helped the monarchy, too.
The procession now heading down Whitehall, a series of turns around Parliament Square before it arrives at the Abbey, which is now about 10 minutes away. The Queen leaving the palace was the signal that everyone else is in place now in the Abbey, or just about to be. The royal family, the immediate royal family, the last to arrive before the procession.
Here he is again, Prince Harry, stepping ahead of the others.
The Queen's limousine, with its motorcycle escort heading towards the Abbey. Queen Mother and the Queen in that limousine. Princess Margaret must already be at the Abbey now.
We love you, Diana! Always.
The 100th sounding of the bell since the procession started, signaling just 7 more times it will ring. It's the Queen Mother at 97 on her own, entering Westminster Abbey. Douglas mentioned Westminster Abbey, the site of her royal wedding so many years, so many decades ago.
You'll see, Peter, as she goes down the aisle, the tomb of the unknown warrior, and she was the first sovereign to place her bridal bouquet on that tomb. It's a tradition which has been followed ever since.
Including by her daughter, Elizabeth,
her daughter, yeah.
Who was married in the same abbey 50 years ago this year.
That's the tomb of the unknown warrior that she's just passed. 17 sovereigns are buried in Westminster Abbey. The last being King George II.
And you can be sure that the Queen Mother, times have been difficult on the medical front in the last couple of years for her, but she was adamant today, you can be sure, that she would walk down the center aisle of the Abbey on her own power, as she does today, at 97.
Times, Peter, they would have had black veils over their faces, the Queen and the Queen Mother. That famous picture of her and the Queen and Mother and Queen Mary, all heavily veiled. But those days are past. I think, ever at her side to give support if needed, but it won't be needed by the Queen Mother.
Final few steps then to Westminster Abbey as the procession needs to arrive in place. Almost to the second, the time scheduled for it to arrive. An amazing 107-minute procession. Upon arrival at the Abbey, the casket will be removed from the gun carriage, be carried into Westminster through the Great West Doors by the 8 members of the Welsh Guard who have escorted it on its journey from Kensington Palace over this past hour and a half. They came over just this past week from Northern Ireland, where they've been stationed for the past 6 months. The Abbey that has seen so much history begins to write yet another page now.
We are gathered here in Westminster Abbey to give thanks for the life of Diana, Princess of Wales, to commend her soul to Almighty God, and to seek his comfort for all who mourn. We particularly pray for God's restoring peace and loving presence with her children, the Princes William and Harry, and all her family. In her life, Diana profoundly influenced this nation and the world. Although a princess, she was someone for whom, from afar, we dared to feel affection, and by whom we were all intrigued. She kept company with kings and queens, with princes and presidents, but especially we remember her humane concerns and how she met individuals and made them feel significant. In her death, she commands the sympathy of millions. Whatever our beliefs and faith, let us with thanksgiving remember her life and enjoyment of it. Let us rededicate to God the work of those many charities that she supported. Let us commit ourselves anew to caring for others. And let us offer to him and for his service our own mortality and vulnerability.
If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others, sore undone, who keep long vigils by the silent dust and weep. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort other hearts than thine. complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I, perchance, may therein comfort you.
morte eterna in die illa tremenda.
Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice. But for those who love, time is eternity.